Well, first of all, thank you for the audience who have dialed in into this session. We're going to talk about Filecoin and Filecoin Frontier Accelerator, which we've just launched a couple of weeks ago. First of all, I'm Emma. I'm the CEO of LongHash Ventures. We are a Web 3.0 focused blockchain accelerator focused on providing a venture building platform for early stage blockchain startups. We also work with the Web 3.0 critical protocols such as Filecoin, Polkadot, Algorand, and a couple of other protocols and projects. So welcome. And today I have a very distinguished guest of panels. We have Ryan from Vine Ventures. We have Colin from Protocol Labs. We also have Remington from Fenbushi Capital. So you're going to hear all about why do they want to be involved with Filecoin, what's happening with Filecoin, and what kind of support that you can get from this Filecoin Frontier Accelerator. So before we get started, I want to pass the mic around for the panelists to quickly introduce themselves. And Colin, do you want to get started?
Yeah, sure thing. So Colin from Protocol Labs. My friends call me Proto Colin. I'm kind of one of the business people at Protocol Labs. So most of my career has been in business. Started off at McKinsey for a couple of years, was an investor at Bain Capital, went to Stanford for my MBA, and started my own company called Yard Club, which was a marketplace for underutilized assets. Think Airbnb for big bulldozers. We grew that for about 4 or 5 years, ended up selling into Caterpillar. And I was kind of in the transition phase there. And my good friend Ryan Zur, who's on the panel, recruited me to the crypto space and said, Protocol Labs and Filecoin is an opportunity you can't miss. And I fell in love with the vision and have been running ecosystem development and operations for Protocol Labs ever since. Thank you, Colin.
I think it'd be really good to dive deeper into some of your experiences. How did you make that transition into Web 2.0 into Web 3.0? Ryan, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry. My name is Ryan Zur. I currently run a alternative assets firm in Switzerland called Dialectic AG. In fact, Vine Ventures, which you mentioned before, is just a portfolio company of ours. I have been a longtime player in the crypto space, early into Bitcoin, day one into Ethereum, and day one into a lot of other Web3 projects through my former firm, Polychain Capital. And we spend a lot of time thinking about alternative assets and the shift that we're going through with a new paradigm shift and a genuinely new world order in today's environment.
Thank you, Ryan. Can't wait to dive into some of that stories. And last but not least, let's hear from Remington.
Hi, my name is Remington. I'm one of the founding partners of Fenbushi Capital. Fenbushi is the first blockchain-focused VC out of Asia. We started in 2015. Our early mission for the past 5 years has been to sort of to build up the ecosystem around blockchain and crypto, sort of building towards this Web 3.0 vision and finding the right entrepreneurs to put together all the building blocks of what would make sort of this new generation of web. And very excited to be here today because the launch of Filecoin is the formal launch of a storage layer for this kind of Web 3.0 stack.
Thank you, Remington. Fenbushi is also a seed round investor in LongHash Ventures, and we work with Fenbushi quite closely. So definitely appreciate the support Fenbushi Capital has been providing to us and also to Filecoin Accelerator. So first of all, I think we should start off maybe Colin, give us a quick lowdown. Congratulations on the mainnet launch. It's been a week and there are a lot of things happening with the Filecoin liftoff week. I hear your session about the update about the ecosystem, and it's quite amazing how right after mainnet launch, you already have a pretty vibrant ecosystem that's already taking place. Do you want to maybe provide a quick overview before we dive into
for sure. So I'm just so incredibly proud of the Filecoin community for reaching this stage. It definitely was not just the Filecoin team. It was a broader ecosystem of really talented individuals and developers that, launched the Filecoin mainnet. And we're just off to the races. We have over 600 miners that have onboarded over 600 petabytes of storage onto the network today. That's like 1.5 million MacBook Pros, or 100 times the Netflix archive, or something like 100 million HD movies or something like that. So it's just absolutely massive. We have over 5,000 open source contributors that have contributed to the project in our repos. We have over 90 collaborators that are building applications and clients and other developer tooling on the mainnet today. And we have over 200 or 250 new projects entering the space, some of which are early stage, like going through hackathons and learning how to build on Filecoin, and some of which are applying for things like LongHash and the accelerator here that are ready to become real big businesses. And so the whole community is just absolutely delighted. And if you haven't visited Liftoff Week, please check it out. There's lots of really awesome events and talks going on right now.
Thanks for that. That's super, super exciting. I think when Filecoin mainnet was launched, I also tweeted that I really feel like I'm part of a history that's in making. So definitely, I hope, a couple of years down the road, when we reflect on this moment, we're like, wow, we were there. So yeah, super exciting. I also want to address this question to Ryan and Remington, right? As investor, what inspired you to come aboard this Filecoin ecosystem? Being a mentor investor that's committed to support this ecosystem, and what makes Filecoin a platform for developers or blockchain startups? Whoever wants to take this question first.
Remington, feel free to go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Ryan. So we live in a world driven by data, right? I think that every application that we use on a daily basis, whether it's WeChat or Facebook or Uber, generates an insane amount of data. I think we saw an estimate that from IDC that there are about 2.5 billion gigabytes, like 2.5 exabytes of data being generated per day, and this was actually back in 2018. So clearly, sort of, there requires to be a lot of storage for this kind of data. Now, when we look at the sort of Web3 and decentralized world, the early sort of blockchain protocols that we have are optimized for transactions, and some of them for sort of smart contract functionality, but not really optimized for storage. I think one of the calculations that we saw was that at a 100 Gwei gas price on Ethereum, for example, it would cost like 60 something ETH just to store 1 megabyte of data on the Ethereum blockchain. So clearly, sort of, it's architected as a transaction layer and not necessarily as a storage layer. So given that applications generate an amount of data, and that sort of we're building towards this decentralized Web3 protocol stack, one of the things that's kind of been missing as a building block is this kind of decentralized storage layer. So with sort of the many years of work put into Filecoin, I mean, it's definitely come a long way since we were meeting with Juan in New York in 2015. Like, it's been very exciting to see sort of all the progress that's been made to realize this vision of building this kind of truly decentralized Web3 optimized kind of storage layer, which will work together with other layers of the stack to build really truly kind of Web3 native applications for the future.
Super exciting, Ryan.
So I will back it up a few years here to a moment in Shanghai with Devcon 2 for those of you who remember this. And I was it was a time when I was fortunate enough to meet Remington and meet Juan Benet, and Juan gave a very impassioned speech about the development that Filecoin IPF was undertaking, and gave just a remarkable demo during this speech that excited the audience there to the point where people were standing up and cheering, and it was really just an incredible moment for all of us who were excited about the space but hadn't really seen any use cases that could apply to people in the real world. And Filecoin IPFS, you could see resonated with that audience in China in a way that we hadn't yet seen before, and excited everyone in the room so much. As you spend time in the Ethereum ecosystem at that time, and even still today, more projects building in Web3 and Ethereum specifically were using IPFS and planning to use Filecoin as a fundamental layer of their project than even those that were planning to use Ethereum. And so we really saw this as a fundamental building block of a Web3 ecosystem, independent of where the transaction layer went. And then, you know, was just being led by an extraordinary visionary in Juan Benet. And so it became a project of great focus of mine. It became a project that I brought to Polychain in the nascent moments of Polychain, and wanted to make it a key thesis bet for Polychain. It was our largest investment at the time of the ICO, and we were very proud of that. And and what's remarkable is today all these things are the same as they were back in 2016, right? China remains the place where Web3 is unfolding more than anywhere else on the planet. Filecoin IPFS remains a critical infrastructure component, independent of the Web3 project that uses it. It's whether it's libp2p or IPFS or IPFS with Filecoin, more projects are leveraging this technology than anything else. So it's a key tool for builders in the space, which as an investor, that's really one of the important litmus tests that we look for something that, you know, that will have value and use for people over time.
Absolutely, that's quite a compelling vision, and I think that's why a lot of other investors were extremely optimistic and very looking forward to see how Filecoin ecosystem could unfold. And I think back to Colin, you had a relatively traditional career path before you joined Filecoin, right? Come from McKinsey. I was at McKinsey as well. McKinsey, then Bain Capital, then you had your own internet startup, and then back then you joined this Filecoin, which is very much a dream back then, right? And how has it been over the last couple of years, putting your head down and building this? Do you feel, first of all, what attracted you? Do you, and the second of all, do you think we're closer to making that vision a reality?
Yeah, great question. What inspired me to join was the mission, to upgrade the web, to make it faster, safer, more resilient to attack, and more open. And it was super inspiring to see IPFS in the wild and the vision for Filecoin coming to fruition. And, you know, Juan Benet just painted that vision for the web, and not only a vision for where it should go, but where it must go, right? And, you know, in some respects, you know, some of the basics of growing a startup were the same, but in other respects, some were very different. Like I really had to learn crypto economics and the foundation of that from scratch. Some of the nuances of open source within the crypto space was definitely new to me. So there's all these things that came together, but what was compelling for me is like there were very few business folks in the crypto space back then. And it was mostly developers, mostly hackers. And I thought like someone with my skill set could bring a different perspective and help Web3 cross the chasm into really being the default kind of stack of the web that people use around the world with a different perspective, right? The technology has since evolved significantly. Obviously, you have, you know, a much more scalable layer with Ethereum 2 and Polkadot and Filecoin and many others. But what I still think is lacking, and what is so important for this cohort of folks joining your accelerator is upgrading the UX and making Web3 mainstream in a way that it's consumable by the masses. Like, what is the next consumer application that's going to reach millions or hundreds of millions of people built on Filecoin or ETH2 or Polkadot? And really what that means is attracting the best and brightest developers and entrepreneurs from around the world to join this movement. And that's what I'm passionate about. And that's kind of what I dedicate, I am dedicating most of my time to, is growing and attracting the best and brightest entrepreneurs and developers to the ecosystem so we can cross that chasm on Web3.
Thanks for that.
If I could just add something here, because going back a few years to this genesis moment of Juan and Colin coming together, you highlighted it very well, that somebody with Colin's gold-plated pedigree would not naturally in that moment jump into to Web3. It was still very much a niche community of outsiders at that point. And I think a couple of things came together to allow Colin to be one of the first people with the pedigree that he has to come into the space and really help bring legitimacy. And it came down to the leadership and vision that Juan had, and that not only was Juan innovating with respect to this very important protocol that was useful to a lot of people around the world, but he was also innovating at the corporate structure, right? Protocol Labs has been running one of the largest decentralized teams that we know of in the world long before COVID was a term, long before Zoomers was a term or anything like that. And that was an innovation that that was very methodically decided upon, and they've innovated it. We could talk for the rest of this panel just other innovations that Protocol Labs has executed on at the corporate level, and we're fortunate that Colin, after having worked in traditional business and built traditional startups, found that to be intellectually interesting, such that he wanted to pursue that for the intellectual curiosity of it, even though it was very non-obvious at that time that we could run an entire team of more than 100 people using technologies like Zoom and instant messaging and so on and so forth. And not only could we do that, we could dog food our own products and use decentralized technologies in order to deliver, higher privacy and in many cases a better user experience. And so what impresses me so much about the Protocol Labs team every day is, first and foremost, their extraordinary professionalism, and second, the commitment that they have to the technologies that they're building. They use this stuff themselves, and they find it useful themselves. So it really becomes, a very real and congruent vision across that organization, which is relatively rare.
It's true. I think what Protocol Lab is doing is totally pushing the frontiers, right? When you're building Web 2.0 startup, there's a lot of playbook by now, right? How do you acquire customer? How do you test your product? How do you scale up and whatnot? But when it comes to Web 3.0, it's really uncharted territory. Every project is experimenting and testing out what's really, and learning quickly from other projects, right? It's really quick iterating and testing things out. So that brings me to the next question. What are some of the natural specific use cases on Filecoin that you're excited about, right? You feel like there's absolutely a natural use case for this. With Filecoin's enablement, this thing's gonna really blow up or grow. Yeah, maybe I hear from Remington first.
Sure. So I think one of the purposes of running an accelerator like this is to sort of seed and generate and attract a lot of creative ideas. So I'll leave a lot of the sort of specific creativity to the entrepreneurs themselves. That said, I think what really excites me is the possibility of not just sort of replicating a Web 2.0 application on this Web 3.0, but really kind of creating blockchain native or decentralized native kind of applications. I think that if you look to the DeFi world, I think automated market makers, AMMs, are sort of an example of a new innovation that's only possible in Web3 that sort of isn't really something brought over from Web 2, but solving sort of a real pain point in decentralized exchanges. I think in the same way we're going to see sort of decentralized native apps that have a decentralized storage layer that is not previously possible on AWS or centralized systems. I think the other thing that we're very excited about, again, sort of we see Filecoin and the storage layer as a critical layer in sort of a full stack, which means that we're very excited to see how teams kind of integrate this with other layers and other protocols. And just throwing out a few examples, I mean, maybe using Filecoin as a storage layer for a decentralized oracle or for decentralized indexing protocol, maybe combining sort of NFTs with a storage layer so that you have digital ownership to large media files or large works of art, maybe integrating sort of a zero knowledge privacy layer on top of a storage system that is decentralized. I'm just kind of throwing out a few ideas here, but I think there are endless possibilities of kind of blockchain native, decentralized native applications that is simply not possible with AWS or traditional storage.
So from technological stack perspective, we're one step closer to decentralization.
I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah. Colin, Ryan, do you guys want to share your perspective?
Yeah, I love the NFT use case, by the way, Remington. We have a few folks definitely developing some applications there, which is pretty awesome. And I just agree with Remington. Like, I love the fact that, you know, rather than replacing a piece of Web 2 technology with something built on Web 3, how do we create a whole new paradigm of things that didn't exist, cannot exist in Web 2? For example, 95% of the data that gets generated in the world that Remington quoted earlier gets thrown away. I mean, it's either too expensive to store on AWS or Google Cloud, or you have to ask someone's permission, or you need to be a company with a credit card, or it's not verifiable. You know, pick your poison. So how do you enable use cases for not the 5% that already has a home on Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services, but for the 95% of data that completely gets thrown away every day, right? And preserve that information for humanity's benefit. So, you know, I'll rattle off a few use cases just for brainstorming, but large archival data sets, things like climate change data that are just going away because no one wants to store them. Large video use cases. Video just takes up a tremendous amount of the web's capacity and often gets thrown away because of that. Ryan and I have a friend that throws away videotapes from his video company every day because it's too expensive to store. Decentralized applications, obviously, everything on Ethereum, TypeFS, et cetera. Verifiable storage, I think, is going to be a big deal. Like when you know exactly what you're getting from what's being stored and no one can swap it out with fake news or a fake picture and things like that. And I think DeFi could be a really big use case on Filecoin as well. You know, turning storage into a commodity and instilling all the same tool sets that exist in the DeFi case to turn storage into a commodity on Filecoin. So that could be pretty interesting as well. And of course, a lot more that far more creative people than me are thinking of today.
Sky's the limit. Brian?
If I could just add one more point to that, I think that Colin brought up something very interesting, which is the 95% of data that's being discarded. And I think one of the limitations of sort of the Web 2 world is that you're relying on a company or sort of a particular entity, like the Internet Archive or Wikipedia or something like that, to sort of organize to collect the money in order to maintain sort of the upkeep for keeping the storage. I think that's it's important to remember that Filecoin is an incentivization layer. And I think that's sort of one of the really interesting things. And Colin mentioned sort of this whole new paradigm of crypto economics. I think sort of being able to incentivize not sort of one organized entity, but sort of getting raw kind of crowdsourced demand of what sorts of data that people want to use and in what way. I think linking that with the incentivization layer that Filecoin enables will really sort of bring out what's valuable in the rest of the 95% of the data that's currently being discarded.
Yeah, totally. I was listening to Polychain Olaf's session during the Filecoin liftoff. He talked about how Filecoin is turning, basically building a global liquid order book for storage. And that is really, really powerful. I think the consequence of that implication is, storage is going to become more secure, cheaper. And your point around how 95% of the data that's thrown away today might be economical to stay, to be stored in the future. Right?
Yeah. So to that point, it's really the economics of storage and getting to the very frontier of efficient use of these capital assets that I find compelling. So if we look at some of the the most successful networks of the last decade, say like Uber and Airbnb, what they have enabled is the more efficient use of capital assets, bringing supply and demand together in a kind of automatic fashion on demand, in order to dramatically lower the cost of using these capital assets in shorter periods of time, in some instances, and actually longer periods of time in other instances. So whether it's cars or houses. And, really, I'm excited for the incentivization layer of Filecoin to enable that for excess storage capacity around the planet. In fact, one of the conversations that I had with Juan in sort of early 2016 was, late 2015 was around this concept of how much excess storage capacity is in the planet that has essentially zero variable cost, right? Like basically everyone on this panel and everybody attending here has a laptop that or desktop computer that probably isn't using more than half of its storage capacity. That has zero variable cost. And so you could offer that to the network and remunerate that extra storage capacity, making the capital asset of your computer, your hard drive, more efficient in the end. And and that may not be necessary for for the fortunate folks that are in this panel or listening here, but it may be super necessary for say a young kid in Bangladesh who can then finance his computer by renting out the hard drive over time. And again, we talk about completely novel business cases and use cases that will arise from this. I'm really excited to sort of see what happens in that margin between what is offered today for cost of storage and what is possible when we have efficient capital usage of the capital assets of storage around the planet. And we'll see how that unfolds. And this is specifically the technology that allows for that.
Yeah, super, super exciting. And I think, as Colin mentioned earlier, right, there's already a huge amount of supply of storage that's available. So I think for the builders out there, if you're interested to build on Filecoin and to get plugged into the ecosystem, you already have basically a lot of the infrastructure already being built. So so I think I want to bring the conversation back to the accelerator a little bit, just for the audience who are not familiar with the parameters. We've started doing recruiting for the accelerator, and application will close by mid of November. And of course, we'll go through the selection and also interviews and whatnot. But the program will actually kickstart by end of January next year for 3 months. And throughout that period, what you can expect is, first of all, a US dollar 20,000 upfront grant from Protocol Labs. There's also up to $1 million of investment funds that's already committed by Protocol Labs as well as Fenbushi Capital. And we're talking to a few other investors as well for demo day itself. And then in addition to the capital support throughout the 3 months, we are really aiming to help you specifically around one, technology, two, networking with go-to-market partners, as well as, and third thing is capital, which is introduce you to a big network of the investors within the LongHash Ventures network, as well as Protocol Labs network. So Protocol Labs would set aside dedicated technical people to help you guys. And also, I think there's going to be a lot of synergy among the 10 projects that we're planning to select for the program, so that you guys can test out each other's product and build upon each other and really, become go-to-market partners. So we're definitely super excited about what kind of applications could build on top of our Filecoin ecosystem. So I have a question for the three of you. I guess what are the, because you've been around for many years in this space, right? So what are some of the advice you would have for early stage blockchain startups in order to help them to succeed?
So if I could go first, I'll kind of split this up into two things. First, specifically with respect to Filecoin IPFS, I think a lot of the most successful new ideas and startups are going to come in attending to the demand side. We have seen just an extraordinary explosion on the supply side with miners, supplying available storage to the network. And really the question for me is now, how do we balance that so that people are using IPFS and are storing their files on IPFS in order to basically ensure long-term economic viability for that supply side. And really that comes down to making things useful for users first and foremost. And I think the most compelling opportunities right now will sit in helping users use IPFS and making almost abstracting away the Filecoin component so that my mom or grandma can use IPFS just as easily as they can use Dropbox. And I can explain it to them as, here, the interface looks the exact same, but here's your account up at the top, right corner, and it's only going to cost you, 0.01 cent per month to store your files and recipes and things like that, instead of you paying $9.99 a month on your credit card to Dropbox. And I think if we can explain to that, and if we can get that constituency onto the network, then we're off to the races. Then that's really compelling, and anybody who helps achieve that is going to capture a lot of value, and that can be via pinning services. But really, I think thinking deeply about a new cohort of non-crypto native audience is where a lot of value will lie.
Yeah, that's the UI UX piece I think Colin was referring to earlier as well.
Yeah.
Totally. Colin, do you want to share your perspective?
Yeah, definitely, focus on product market fit, right? Make sure you're building something that a real set of users and a large set of users in a large market really wants. And it's not necessarily new to Web3. This is just fundamental advice, but make sure you're solving a problem that's that requires an aspirin, not a vitamin, something that users desperately need. But once you find that, and like Ryan said, make it easy to use some of these underlying protocols. If you check out Slate or Fleek, these are like Dropbox style applications that integrate seamlessly with IPFS and Filecoin. You wouldn't even know you're using a Web3 product. If you can master that experience, then you can use the crypto economic incentives to scale this in a way that just cannot be scaled in a Web2 context. And that's really important to understand. Like the amount of scale you can achieve by taking advantage of the capacity and the Filecoin native kind of incentivization layer are things that do not exist in Web 2 and that can be used for that purpose. So those are just 3 pieces of advice. Make sure you focus on product market fit. People are the, something that people want. Make sure you make it really easy for the end user to engage. Slate, Fleek, those are great examples. And 3 is leverage the crypto economic incentives of the underlying protocols to grow this at a rapid rate.
Absolutely. I think the first 2 points are even more relevant for Web 3.0 applications, just because it's just so difficult to use at this point of time. And the last piece is actually the powerful weapon that exists in crypto startups, right? You have this incentive layer that you can leverage to bootstrap your network, which is not available in a lot of Web 2.0 startup. Graham?
Yep, so fully agree with everything that Ryan and Colin said. And to add to that, sort of a couple of general pieces of advice. First is to kind of focus. So not just focusing on the pain point that Colin addressed, but sort of focus on a key set of sort of early adopters and focus on sort of solving one pain point rather than sort of 10 different pain points. I think a lot of founders have sort of these grand visions of disrupting everything for everyone. But sort of if you look at some of the most successful companies in the world, I mean, before Apple started selling music and selling watches, they just did one thing very well, which is build a great personal computer. So the same mantra kind of goes for any startup to sort of focus on one thing first. And this leads to the second thing, which is execution, because ideas are a dime a dozen. And sort of what sets one team apart from the other is their ability to execute. And I think this is where really sort of the value of LongHash Ventures and Filecoin Frontier Accelerator really comes in. So being able to leverage the massive amount of experience from the mentor network, people who have sort of been building in Web3 for the past few years, and really sort of understand Web3 specific nuances around sort of crypto economics, around network effects, around sort of incentivizing open source software and so forth. Being able to understand sort of how to get these products out there and be useful in a Web3 context is sort of one of the things, one of the values that an accelerator program like Filecoin Frontier Accelerator would be able to help with. And then finally, I think that this leads to the final point, which is validation and iteration. I think that don't sort of be married to your idea. Sort of get your product out there, go get as much feedback as possible from users, from investors, from even competitors, and then iterate upon the product. Because no matter if it's Web3 or not, sort of like building a product is an iterative process. And as sort of the space matures and more tooling is available and people's demand changes, sort of your product has to evolve along with the space as well.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I think over the last couple of years, we've seen quite a lot of startups that's you look with I guess they use blockchain as a hammer, looking for a problem to solve, right? Like looking for a nail. So by slapping a layer of blockchain seems to be the magic world. But I think the market, the patience of the market will run off if you don't show real traction, right? And I'm glad to see a lot of real traction and a lot more push and sharper focus for startups to solve for real pain points. And you can actually see if you focus on solving one or two really pain point really deeply, you actually gain traction very quickly and get validated very, very quickly in the market. So we have a question from the audience. So there is let me first get to the question. We have a question from Michael, and he said, will you be specifically looking to fund startups that complement the file storage use case in practical applications?
You know,
Yes.
and I defer to you, but yeah, that's a big category, but there's also lots of other ideas too, right? Like we're running another accelerator that's focused on the retrieval market, bunch of DeFi use cases using wrapped fill on Ethereum. You know, there's just like a lot of use cases, but I think one very powerful one is that one that you described, because there is just so much capacity to take advantage, and the cost structure is so much lower than the traditional Web 2 solutions that there's definitely opportunity there.
Yeah, I think definitely naturally when people think of Filecoin, people will be looking to build a decentralized version of file storage, right? But I think we definitely are extremely open-minded to look and see, you know, what the creative teams out there could build. And like we mentioned earlier, a lot of the Web 3.0 applications are just completely, you know, different from Web 2.0. And who knows, you might come up with something that's completely blowing everyone's mind. So yeah. We have another question from Kevin Wan. He said, I was actually attracted by share I was attracted by share hours idle storage like Airbnb in the very beginning by Filecoin. Back to reality, the current Filecoin mining network is built by tons of expensive servers and GPU machines. The cost is not zero and even more expensive than centralized cloud provider. Are there any plans to make it possible for miners to join with their home idle computer storage with much more lower cost? I think that'll be a question to you, Colin.
Yeah, of course. So, you know, if we go back in time, obviously the Ethereum mining hardware was very different when Ethereum launched many years ago than it is today. So I think there'll be a natural curve where the hardware gets a lot cheaper and more specialized and easier to use. But just today, when you think about the competitive advantage of someone mining in their home and putting storage on, that is really the retrieval market, right? So in Filecoin, there's two markets. There's the storage market. You can think large quantities of data centers that are more for archival purposes. And then you have the retrieval miners where you could pull a file that's really popular, let's say, you know, your most popular Netflix show, download it to your, you know, server in your apartment, and then serve it out to 300 nodes that are really, really nearby to you for a cost that's a lot cheaper than a CDN. And so the retrieval component is going to be really important, and that's, you know, just being developed right now. It's a little bit less developed than the storage mining, but it's going to be extremely profitable for folks to become retrieval miners, whether that's in major cities to bring the data closest to the edge where it's being served, or like a really rural area where there isn't really an existing data center anywhere nearby, and so you can kind of be the exclusive provider of that content.
If I could add a point to that, I would, you know, I would encourage people to look at this from the perspective of other networks and other economies of scale. So, for example, today I'm staying in an Airbnb, which is, I think, about a 2,000 unit building, of which are all Airbnbs. And so while Airbnb was conceptualized and made possible for this idea of like people renting out single apartments, really it's been dominated by professional shops that, you know, that run tens or dozens or thousands of units at once. And that's just the nature of economies of scale and competitive markets that you know, that drive towards the lowest cost advantage over time. and I think any network will naturally have that. So I would encourage people not to be discouraged by the fact that a lot of the storage market in Filecoin IPFS is being supplied by very large professional organizations. That's just, in fact, an indication of efficiency in the network and inevitability of network success over time. However, within these large networks, there are opportunities for individuals or smaller organizations to carve out a niche and offer something, like Colin said, at the edges that is a unique value proposition. And so I would encourage people to, instead of maybe filling your apartment with servers and just offering storage, think very deeply about geographies, think very deeply about retrieval and pinning services, and offering that kind of connective tissue to the network that makes it function in a more efficient fashion. Not to say that you shouldn't add storage to the network. I think we still have a long way to go to get to where we want to be with respect to storage. But I do think that for small entrepreneurial organizations and for individuals, there's more compelling opportunity in being that connective tissue.
That's such a good perspective, I think, because Filecoin is building the back-end infrastructure, but from there to end customer, there's multiple layers, right? Like you said, localization, customization, and user experience, UI, UX, all those things would count and are able to offer opportunities for startups to capture opportunity. And then the rules of engagement are quite different. I think, and storage layer, it's probably more about capital efficiencies, right? Cost of utilities and everything. But as you go closer to the end users, you capture value by offering different service and compete differently. Next question we have from Liu Li Bo. How do you take real data and scale it up by a factor of 10? I'm not sure I quite get this question.
I'll take a stab. I'm not sure if it'll answer it directly, but it's funny that he uses the number 10 because there is a mechanism built into the Filecoin protocol that is yet to be turned on, but will be turned on soon. We have a session on it, I believe, on Thursday in case you want to visit, and it's called verified clients. So that basically says if a data set, no matter how big, is verified by a set of independent kind of community members, then a miner that stores that data set will earn a block reward of 10 times what the normal block reward is, which creates this massive, massive incentive for miners to compete and store as much real verified data as they possibly can. So you can think about offering this to, let's say, Vimeo, right? And how do we, get Vimeo's entire video data sets onto Filecoin? Well, putting that disproportionate incentive would just put a tremendous amount of real data on the network. So I'm not sure if that quite answers the question, but stay tuned for verified clients. There'll be some documentation being released on Thursday, and that's going to really incentivize the entire Filecoin community to find and store amazing real data sets that are verified by the community.
I think Liu will also put on additional question. I really want to know, what about the certification application conditions and specifications of the real data audit institutions? Our company hopes to apply for the data audit institution according to the regulation, and we're very willing to pay for it.
So you should go to the session and ask some questions on Thursday. I think there's a lot of details that are yet to be released, but will be released soon on that one. So won't spoil the fun.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We have it from Chen Ding Gan. Sorry if I didn't pronounce correctly. Would future ISP step in and stopping home users to provide files? Because technically it's providing a business service. Is there any remedy mitigation on that risk?
Well, I, as an investor, wish very much that a really talented team in this space would would build out something somewhat similar to Filecoin IPFS, but for ISPs. I think that's like, just a remarkable opportunity, and I'm quite hopeful that we'll see something of that nature in the not too distant future. So that's sort of the first solution to that, is that we use the technologies that we've created here to also solve that problem, because it's, that is a real risk we see. But again, we have all of the tools to solve these problems. It's just a matter of implementing them.
Great. Next one. How ready is retrieval mining today for application in terms of geography and capacity?
Yeah, so there's certainly multiple versions of a version 1 of the retrieval market that you can download. ChainSafe developed one. The Consensus Pegasus team, I think they've renamed themselves Mesh. They're developing one as well. We developed one at Protocol Labs internally that's released as well. And there's a team, I think, in another accelerator that just presented today. So there's actually, if you go on the Filecoin YouTube, there is a whole retrieval market session that had 4 or 5 different presenters from different perspectives that you can watch, and that just happened a couple hours ago. That said, there's lots of room to improve in the retrieval market. We need version 2 and version 3 to make these markets really efficient, really easy to download for the average consumer, really hardware light, et cetera. And so we could use all the help we can get from the.
Awesome. Next question. In order to prioritize, are you more interested by providing adoption to retail or business? I think this is a question of B2B or B2C. We have use cases to integrate in our mobile app where we have 1 million download already, but also on our B2B product where our existing customers are banks. I can take a step on this. I think from Accelerator's perspective, I would say we're open to all, whether it's to B or to C. I think there's merits in both. So we're going to keep an open mind. Colin, is there anything you want to add?
Maybe Remington can comment.
Yeah, sure. No, we're also open to both use cases, and I echo Colin's sentiment from earlier, sort of addressing a pain point that requires an aspirin and not a vitamin. I think it doesn't matter if your end user is a retail customer or enterprise user. If you're solving something that's really painful for them, that they're willing to pay for and change their behavior for, I think that's a very powerful thing, no matter what customer segment you serve.
Awesome. I think the next question is also similar from Mike. What are your ideal use cases for the accelerator? Enterprise use cases suitable? I would say both, depending on what problems you're solving for. We're not using that as a judging criteria. Next one, what are some of the real examples of content addressable storage being superior to object storage for startup or enterprise? Rem, did you want to share?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. And I think, while I'm not sure if I'm answering this correctly, but I'm addressing this sort of more on a content addressable storage versus location addressable storage. I think one of the sort of really powerful things about Filecoin and IPFS is sort of this idea of permanence and versioning as well. So when I'm looking for a particular piece of content, I'm not looking for whatever happens to be at a particular location at a certain point in time, but I'm looking for a specific version of this document. This can be, it could be around sort of versions of Google Docs that people are continuing to edit together, or a version of Wikipedia, or even sort of versions of newspapers where we talk about sort of fake news. We talk about sort of people editing content afterwards without any transparency. I think that having sort of content addressable storage, which can point to what was a specific version of a content at a particular point in time is really powerful for auditability, for verifiability, for sort of information transparency use cases.
And I just might add, we have an entire day dedicated to storing on Filecoin on Thursday at Liftoff Week. So show up, there'll be lots and lots of examples that you can pull from and get some new ideas.
Awesome. Great. I think we've come to the end of the session and we'll address all the questions. And there's a personal message to Ryan. So thank you so much to the panelists, Colin, Ryan, and Remington. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer the questions. And I think Colin will obviously be very involved throughout the accelerator, and Ryan and Remington has kindly offered to be mentors among a large panel of other mentors and investors who are extremely keen to contribute to the Filecoin ecosystem. So stay tuned, and definitely if you have any questions for the accelerator, please reach out to LongHash Ventures team, and we'll be happy to walk you through the parameters, answer any questions you have, and look forward to see the application.